On the 1st of September 1994, an American journalist walked into the office of Israel's prime minister with a warning that didn't come from any spy network, surveillance tap, or informant in the field. It came, he said, from the Bible. Michael Drossman told Yitzhak Rabin that hidden in the Hebrew text of the Old Testament was a message. His full name, crossed by the words "a assassin that will assassinate," and a year 5756 in the Hebrew calendar. Translated into Western dates, that meant sometime after September 1995. Rabin, a veteran general and career realist, brushed it off. Israel's leaders lived under constant threat. One more warning, especially one pulled from an ancient manuscript, was easy to ignore. 14 months later, on the 4th of November 1995, Rabin was shot by Yigal Amir, a Jewish extremist, at a peace rally in Tel Aviv. When Drossman sat back down at his computer and typed in Amir, the name appeared in the same matrix as Rabin's, interwoven with that earlier phrase, "assassin that will assassinate." For believers in what became known as the Bible Code, it looked like proof, a 3,000-year-old text predicting a modern political murder with unnerving precision. For everyone else, it raised a harder question. If you search a sacred book with enough computing power and enough flexibility, are you uncovering a hidden design or just carving meaning out of noise? Our approach to this file, as always, follows a simple rule. Build the case, test it, and see what survives. Tonight, we open file 8 to 10, the Bible Code, prophecy, pattern, or clever illusion, a code older than computers. The idea that Scripture might carry a second, secret message isn't new. Medieval rabbis played with numerical values of Hebrew letters and acrostics. Mystical traditions treated the Torah as a kind of divine cipher. The modern story starts in the 1940s with a Czech rabbi, H. D. Weissmandl. Working with nothing more than pencil, paper, and patience, he noticed that if you took the Hebrew text of Genesis, removed the spaces, and read every 50th letter, you could spell the word Torah, the traditional name for the first 5 books of the Bible. When he tried the same trick in Exodus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, the same word appeared again. It was a curiosity, almost a party trick. But to some it hinted at something deliberate, a signature hidden in the text itself. Decades later, in Jerusalem, mathematician Eliyahu Rips decided to test the idea with more than intuition. He transcribed all 304,805 letters of the Hebrew Pentateuch into a computer, stripped of spaces, exactly as tradition said Moses received it, an unbroken stream of characters. Then he did something that, in the age of mainframes and later personal computers, became painfully easy. He wrote code to look for patterns, building the matrix. The method Rips and his colleagues used has a dry, technical name, Equidistant Letter Sequences, but the logic is simple. Imagine writing a paragraph with no spaces, then circling every 4th letter. Those circled letters form a new word. Change the spacing, every 5th, every 20th, every 1,000th letter, and you get different words. Do this at enough intervals, in enough directions, and your paragraph becomes a kind of word search puzzle. Rip's program automated that process across the entire Hebrew Bible. The computer searched for a given name, Yitzhak Rabin, for example, by skipping through the text at fixed intervals until the letters aligned. Once a hit appeared, the program reformatted the text into a grid, rows and columns built around that skip length. In one of Rip's demonstrations, Yitzhak Rabin fell into place at intervals of 4,772 letters. When the computer divided the text into 62 rows of that length, other words emerged in the same compact area of the grid. Amir, name of assassin, assassin will assassinate, and the Hebrew year 5756, the year Rabin was killed. The effect on the printed page looks uncanny, a sea of Hebrew letters with names and phrases crossing like intersecting streets on a city map. But a single example proves very little. So Rips and physicist Doran Whitstone designed a more formal test. They compiled a list of 32 prominent rabbis and sages from Jewish history, along with dates of birth and death taken from standard reference works. Then they asked a simple statistical question. If the Bible's letters were just random for this purpose, how often would the names of those rabbis appear unnaturally close to their own birth and death dates in an equidistant letter matrix? And would that happen more often here than in other texts? The team ran the experiment on the Hebrew book of Genesis. Then, as a control, they ran the same algorithm on other Hebrew texts, including a translation of Tolstoy's War and Peace. According to their published results, War and Peace and the other texts produced nothing significant. Genesis, they claimed, produced meaningful name-date pairings at odds of about 1 in 10 million. The study made it into the journal Statistical Science, where skeptical editors invited readers to treat it as a challenge to discern whether the authors are playing games. Mathematicians debated the method. Codebreakers like Harold Gans at the U.S. National Security Agency, initially skeptical, reported that when they replicated Rip's procedures as described, they saw similar patterns in the biblical text. Whatever one believed about divine communication, something odd seemed to be happening in the numbers. The journalist and the prophecies. Into that simmering debate walked Michael Drosnin, an investigative reporter with a taste for Cold War secrets and political intrigue. Where Rips wanted to establish that a code existed, Drosnin wanted to know what it said. Using versions of the same software, he began scanning the Hebrew Bible for modern names, places, and events. If a story dominated front pages, an assassination, a war, even a space mission, he claimed he could find it encoded somewhere in the Old Testament, often clustered in tight little clusters of intersecting words. His subsequent book, The Bible Code, popularized the idea for a global audience. On its pages, matrices appear that allegedly point to Adolf Hitler, World War II, the Holocaust, the Apollo 11 moon landing, John F. Kennedy, and his brother Robert, President Clinton, and the First Gulf War, not just with names, but with dates, locations, and sometimes phrases like atomic holocaust or world war. Drosnin's most dramatic example was the Rabin warning. In his telling, once he saw Rabin's name crossed by assassin that will assassinate, and the year 5756, he felt a responsibility to act. The letter he delivered to the Prime Minister quoted the Matrix directly. "That should not be ignored," he wrote. "You are in real danger." Rabin ignored it. The assassination came, and the Matrix, frozen in an ancient text, could be read as having predicted it. Drosnin then pressed further into the future. In the same grids that spelled out Prime Minister Netanyahu, he claimed, there were words and phrases like atomic holocaust. His soul will be cut off, murdered, and great horror. Other matrices, he argued, warned of Earth annihilated by a comet in the early 21st century, or of catastrophic earthquakes in 2000-2006, and even a global event in the year 2113. Even Eliyahu Rips, cautious by temperament, admitted he had seen matrices that looked like warnings, clusters referring to Saddam Hussein, missiles, and a specific date in the Hebrew year when Iraq's first Scud missiles did in fact hit Israel during the Gulf War. Asked whether those were prophecies, he demurred. Perhaps, he suggested, they should be read as warnings, not fixed fate. For many readers in the 1990s, it felt like a thriller made real. Ancient scripture, modern software, and a code that seemed to reach across centuries. But the closer you look at how the code works, the more the thrill starts to blur into something else: pattern or illusion. The Bible code rests on three pillars: the mechanics of equidistant letter sequences, the statistical claim that those sequences are too unlikely to be random, and the interpretation that what emerges is meaningful. All three are more fragile than they first appear. First, the mechanics. Any long string of letters without spaces contains countless ways to carve out words. You can skip every second letter, every third, every thousandth. You can read forward, backward, diagonally, or in rectangles. Hebrew helps this process along. Many words are short, and vowels are often implied rather than written. A little flexibility goes a long way. Critics, including some Hebrew scholars, point out that once you allow that freedom, multiple directions, overlapping skip lengths, selective spelling, nearly any cluster of short words can be assembled if you're willing to search hard enough. The text becomes less like a deliberately constructed crossword and more like a vast cloud of letters in which someone is free to draw lines until a picture appears. Second, the statistics. Rips and Whitstone argued that their experiment with rabbis and dates showed something genuinely non-random. But statisticians examining their work noted that choices made before the experiment, such as which rabbis to include, how to spell their names, which dates to use, which parts of the text to search, could subtly bias the outcome. Change those inputs and the odds shift. Other mathematicians went further. Using similar equidistant letter techniques, they found ominous prophecies and other large books, plagues and assassinations hidden in Moby Dick, disasters lurking in secular Hebrew novels. The message from those counter-experiments was simple. Given enough text and enough leeway, patterns will emerge everywhere. The magazine article that profiled Drosnin and Rips at the time captured this skepticism neatly. In its viewpoint section, it noted that many of the Bible code's more dramatic hits required reading words backward, diagonally, or in tortured directions. That short Hebrew words can be strung together in many ways. And that, like the writings of Nostradamus, the real problem isn't finding predictions, it's deciding after the fact which of many possible readings matches the event. Finally, interpretation. Even Drosnin acknowledges that the code doesn't offer certainties. His matrices show possibilities, probabilities that might or might not be realized. If they were ironclad, he argues, they would erase free will. That framing, of course, cuts both ways. A warning that may or may not happen is very close to a vague prophecy reinterpreted after the fact. Atomic holocaust clustered around a leader's name can sound chilling in any tense political moment. A comet that might strike in 2006, 2010, or 2012 offers 3 chances to retrofit meaning to whatever disasters those years actually bring. The deeper tension is psychological. Human beings are extraordinarily good at seeing patterns, faces in clouds, shapes in static, destiny in coincidence. The Bible code amplifies that tendency with software, searching millions of possible alignments until something looks meaningful. When it hits a story that already carries emotional weight, Rabin's murder, the Holocaust, apocalyptic fears, the result feels less like coincidence and more like revelation. Yet there's another possibility, one that keeps cautious mathematicians up at night. What if there is some non-random structure in the Torah's letters, something that makes certain clusters more likely than chance, without that structure being a message from outside time? Language is not a random process. Scribal traditions are not purely mechanical. Copying, redaction, and the constraints of Hebrew itself may create patterns we do not fully understand. In that reading, the Bible code is neither a divine telegraph nor a complete illusion. It's evidence that a complex text shaped over centuries, can harbor statistical quirks that look like design, without serving any clear communicative purpose. What the code really tells us. So where does that leave the warning Drosnin delivered in 1994, and the chilling fact that Yitzhak Rabin did, in the end, die at an assassin's hand during the very year flagged in that matrix? There are two plausible readings. One is entirely earthly. Given a large enough text, flexible spelling, and unlimited skip patterns, someone somewhere will pull out an eerily specific prediction before an event happens. The success stories get remembered and published. The countless failures vanish into the background. In that view, Rabin's matrix is a statistical fluke elevated by tragedy. The other takes the patterns more seriously. Something in the structure of the Hebrew text, whether by design, tradition, or chance, those seem to produce clusters of names and dates more tightly than some control experiments would expect. If so, the Bible code may be a real phenomenon, but one whose meaning we have overstated, a strange byproduct of language and history that resists being turned into a reliable oracle. Neither answer is comforting. If the code is illusion, it shows how readily we bend randomness into prophecy, especially when sacred texts and national trauma are involved. If the code is real but opaque, it hints at layers of structure in our oldest books that we're still unequipped to decipher. The letters on the page haven't changed in 3 millennia. Our software has. Our hunger for patterns certainly hasn't. Somewhere between faith, mathematics, and our own need for meaning, the Bible code sits. Part warning, part mirror, part riddle we may never fully resolve. Because every mystery hides a truth.